Hey everyone, it's the Nitty Professor. As some of you know, yesterday I posted a video on a needlepoint that I would love to attend to again, and it drew me to the fact that even though I primarily knit now, in the past I was quite the needlepointer, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to being like multi-craft people. A lot of you do several crafts, or maybe you've kind of switched crafts, and I ran across a reading today that addressed that very issue, and I thought I would share some of the insights. It's from this book called Everyday Spiritual Practice, and the author Annie Foerster contributed an article which is called Meditation by Hand, and she addresses this very situation or fact of switching from one craft to another because the first one stopped working for her. So I thought I'd kind of look at some of her insights because they're really pretty cool. So she was a needlepointer, and she starts writing about her fascination, her obsession with needlepoint. She's probably obsessed about needlepoint in the way that I was like maybe 30 years ago. I was all into K-facet and stuff, and I still have quite a lot of unfinished canvases. I really need to get back to some of them. So it was kind of inspiring to read her account. She loved the craft for a lot of different reasons, and they included a list that's going to be somewhat familiar to all of us, I think. The cadence, the rhythm of the needle going in and out of the canvas. And as I read these off, I want you to keep in mind that she's writing about having done it during meetings and when she was in groups of people. So she liked the idea of the soothing heartbeat that happened, I guess, that it accompanied her working on needlepoints. She liked the tactile reflection, the feeling of the wool in her hands, the needle going in and out of the canvas. And that's something I always cherished about needlepoint too. I will say that depending on the canvas and the size of the needle and the gauge and all that kind of thing, sometimes I got tired of holding that little metal needle, and that's something I like about knitting. Like right now I'm literally knitting with plastic needles because they're not as hard and they're bigger. But the tactile reflection was something that she really prized. This tie to the physical world, again, using wool. I know you can find needlepoint kits today with acrylic, and I'm like, no, it's got to be wool. It's got to be wool. Maybe, embroidery like silk, maybe cotton, but let's say a positive tied to the tactile world, the physical world. You could have a cotton canvas too, or maybe linen, and those are just really seductive things. She loved the sensuous colors, and that's always something that I loved about needlepoint. Still love all the different colors that you can put, and it's not like you have to worry about, I'm carrying 3 colors. Oh my gosh, you can have however many colors that you want. She found the practice really healing, and it established kind of a spiritual connection for her through the creative process. She also uses a phrase of the pictures as silent witnesses to the act of creation, which I think is really cool. I'm a musician, so I also like auditory witnesses to the act of creation, but she liked the idea of silent witnesses to the act of creation in her needlepoint canvases. She also liked the discipline of it, the regularity of it, the goal setting, the rhythm. Let me see, I got to read my own writing here. It focused her mind, and she said it made her mind less scattered. And I wondered how many of you can relate to that. I think that's probably true. My mind, I don't know, I don't handle it well when I don't have anything to do. I took my son to get a vehicle, so we had to drive 2 hours, and I woke up a little late, and we had to get ahead of the snow and all that stuff. So I rushed out the door, and I was kind of upset that didn't bring any knitting along. So what did I end up doing while I was waiting for him to make the deal? I just got emails off of my email account, which was kind of necessary, but I don't do well when I can't just sit. And I think that's kind of one of the things that she's talking about there, is making her mind less scattered. My mind is just not in a happy place when I have nothing to do. And again, she wrote a lot about doing needlepoint in meetings, where she was more attentive, more thoughtful, and she felt like the steady rhythm of doing the needlepoint and all the stitch work steadied her mind. Again, it kind of goes back to the idea of you're less scattered. So she did this for a long time, and then she went through some kind of a crisis. She didn't specify it. I don't think it matters. A crisis is a crisis. You know, it could be health crisis, could be death in the family, could be losing a job. We all go through crises, right? And all of a sudden, when that crisis happened, she realized that she didn't want to do needlepoint anymore. And it just made me kind of sad, you know, to think that a beloved activity that brings you all those benefits that I just told you about, it's like it stopped working. It's like it was switched off. It no longer brought those benefits. It was no longer soothing. In fact, she found it downright disturbing. And some of you may recall I did a little interview of a person who did machine knitting at the Fiber Festival. I believe it was the one, it might have been the one in Watertown. But in any case, she recounted a similar situation where, you know, she used to knit all the time and she did it with her husband, and then her husband passed and she just couldn't pick up a pair of knitting needles anymore. So she switched to the knitting machines, and that worked for her. So, what happened to Foerster here, the author, when she did not needlepoint, is she became very restless. She was fidgety, just never felt like she could be at ease. And she also missed the spiritual grounding. So she, you know, couldn't needlepoint anymore. And she wrote that this went on for about 3 years. And she missed all of those things that were so beneficial. So she experimented with quilting, which I find really cool. That's something I want to do. I haven't gotten into yet, but one of these days when I get more settled into my routine as an author, I've got like 6 books that are just waiting to be edited and put out there. I'm almost ready with book 2, y'all. Almost ready. I've gotten some final edits. I'm waiting on a blurb, and I talked to my artist yesterday. Hopefully within a week. I'm behind, but we're getting really close. In any case, I need more time because I would like to try quilting too. So in any case, this Annie Foerster, she tried quilting. And some of the things that distinguished it from the needlepointing that she was doing is it required more space. And as a result, since she couldn't do it in a meeting or in a group of people, it forced her to be alone. And she discovered that on the one hand, the benefits that she had previously gotten out of needlepointing were restored. It was soothing, it brought her peace, it steadied her mind, all that good stuff. But it didn't have that kind of public aspect of doing it with other people. She writes that it became a very messy process. I think if I recall correctly, there was one point where she was using 27 different fabrics, and she had pieces of cotton and fabric all spread out in just a maze all over a big table. And she used the word frenzy of activity to describe how she went about quilting. And she emphasized how she did this without being judgmental about herself, without exercising judgment or doubt. And as she did that, she was able to restore the sense of peace. And she also had a benefit that was not necessarily part of her needlepointing, which was this inward turn. And one of the sort of metaphors that she uses for this work, and, you know, it applies to the creative process overall, but specifically with regard to the quilting, is she labeled it soul work. I thought that was a cool metaphor. I definitely could use that. It also told her that, you know, based on this chaotic process and the outcome of a beautiful, orderly quilt, it was taught her the lesson that you can make order out of chaos, and that you do not need to let chaos overwhelm you or control you. And I think that can also relate to, you know, whatever crisis she went through. Again, we can probably all relate to this. Thinking about a crisis and the chaos that it brings into your life, it just knocks everything out of kilter. And quilting became like a metaphor for her, that she could have a chaotic process and it may go in a direction that she wasn't intending, but the final outcome could be a kind of order. Not that we want, you know, fiber crafting and fiber art to be too orderly, but it definitely has order, and sometimes it's a very nuanced order. I think of it that way. So she refers to creativity as spiritual discipline. That's something I've done a video on knitting as spiritual practice. And I like this emphasis on discipline. In fact, I was thinking it'd be kind of cool to do a video on discipline. You know, knitting is discipline. I think there's a lot to that. And it can be very useful. You know, discipline has a lot of outcomes that can be very beneficial. So might talk about that at some point. But some other remarks that she had regarding the necessity of creativity in her life is it needs to have intentionality. So, when you're sitting around, and this is something that she pointed out, if you're just kind of not really doing anything but fidget, she used the word tattooing with her hands, like drumming, that it's not disciplined and it's not intentional. But on the other hand, she does stress this idea that creativity, when it is more of a spiritual discipline, should be exercised without concern for the outcome. It's not so much about like profit, in the sense of, oh, I have to reach a certain threshold or a certain level, or, like we have in video games. You're not necessarily worried about like gain or outcome, but there's more of a concern for the healing power. And she also wrote quite a bit about how she thinks it's healthy to be able to just put a project down. If the project isn't doing it for you, she said she's going to put it down and she's going to go to another process. Just trust her mind, trust her heart, trust her inner instincts to guide her on the creative path. And I thought that was really healthy because I could definitely relate to that. I just, I've got 10 at least whips going on, and I have proved that I was able to finish something and finish a couple things this past week, and I'm well on my way to finishing a few others. So it can work, it can work. You can still have outcomes and you can celebrate those outcomes. She says you really need to celebrate the outcomes. That's part of the whole game, as it were, of if you do accomplish something that you're proud of, then hang it up, wear it, give it away, show it to people, etc., which I like to do that too. My wall is like right behind me. There's a black owl picture with a red frame. That's something that my mother finished. And this painting over here, you can see if I can make my finger point at it, is a painting that my mother did of a cat. But next to that is this rug. This hooked rug is something that I just kind of threw together in a creative frenzy. Again, trying a different craft, rug hooking. And it's a cat, and it turned out pretty good. And I'm celebrating it by having it over my bed. It's very soft. So a couple more things she mentioned is that it's great to strive for excellence. Obviously we want to make things that we're proud of, that make us feel good, that validate our worthiness as human beings, but without exercising judgment, without like doubting, without being concerned about that particular aspect of creativity. So her ultimate conclusion in this little reading is that choosing new mediums is okay, and that, again, it's important to use your intuition. So if something isn't working for you, so apparently, I reached a point in my life where a needlepoint just kind of stopped cutting it. Guess what? I switched to knitting, and I've been really knitting daily for years now. And I have done a little bit of needlepoint. I finished a needlepoint project a couple months ago, which I need to black and turn it into something. Even if I just frame it, again, I have to celebrate it, right? But recently, I've just mainly been knitting. I tried crochet briefly one time, and I might do that some more. I did some weaving, But the good news is that I have access to other creative mediums. So if I decide, well, I'm going to put down knitting for a little while and go back to needlepoint, or I'm going to do weaving, or I really want to try tapestry weaving, I really want to try rug hooking, it's great, just follow your instincts. And I'd be really curious, if you've done that. Like if you, you're like me, you switched to knitting from a different craft. Or you're in the midst now, maybe you knit and you crochet, or you do multiple crafts at once. Or you're toying with, well, I want to get into quilting. A friend of mine, I just met with her and a couple of her friends at the mall. She's like, well, I quilt on some days and I knit on other days. And I think she really does equal parts of both. And, she knits gifts for people, so she does finish things, but she has a lot of other things that are sort of in process. And she just does it for enjoyment. For enjoyment as a stress release, and to, just to live a better life. Really, that's what it comes down to. So, the last thing that she argued in this reading, which is kind of interesting. Maybe I'll just read it to you because it's kind of It's almost like an extreme point of view, but I don't necessarily disagree. Let's see here. And talks about an ancient wisdom suggests that while food is necessary for life, we can live for weeks without food. While water is necessary for life, we can live for days without water. And while breath is necessary for life, we can live for several minutes without breath. But if one has no creative imagination, one might as well be dead. It says it right there, folks. It says it right there. I'm like, whoa. Why not practice a spiritual discipline that encourages life? So let me know what you think about that. I mean, there's like the whole Maslow hierarchy of needs and, going from place, shelter, food, water, and all the way up to, writing Goethe's Faust, right? So I'd be curious how she would react to that hierarchy of needs. But in any case, if you've switched crafts, or if you are in the process, or if you are multi-craftual, share your story, if you're willing to. Look forward to your comments. I hope if you celebrate Advent that you're having a nice spiritual weekend. I definitely used to celebrate that. The Unitarian Church tends to sort of riff on a lot of holidays from other traditions. So I'm going to listen to today's sermon in the morning because I was writing. So I'll be curious if they mention that. But if you do celebrate Advent, I hope you have a wonderful Advent. If you don't celebrate anything, I hope you have a wonderful week and are enjoying whatever winter is beginning to bring to you. It's certainly on the horizon. We've gotten probably about 8 or 9 inches of snow total around here. So winter is definitely here, and I'm certainly enjoying all of the things I have knit and am knitting, and I hope the same is true for you. So y'all take care, and we'll talk soon. Bye.